chapter, I believe that's 14. Text number 22 to 25. So let's begin by offering our obeisance to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Satarne. Savitri Devi Dasi, Kate, what's the time where you are now? Katori Chasu.
6:30.
6 часов. Утро.
No, por la tarde.
Где?
Омск.
Омск. 6 часов. Это поздно.
Как в Индии.
Как в Индии. Oh, okay. Oh. Омск. Не очень плохо. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Prakasham Cha Pravitim Cha Omeva Cha Pandava Nadveshti Sampravitani Ninivritani Kanshati Udasinadvarasino Gunayovana Vichayate Gunavartanti Ityevam Yovatishyati Nengate Samadukha Sukha Swasta Samalostras Makangshana Tuya Priya Priya Dhiras Tuya Nindatma Samsuti Manapamanayo Tulyas Tulya Mitrari Pakshayo Sarvaramba Prityagi Gudakti Taksu Uchite. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or longs for them when they disappear, was unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions in the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, was situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, was equal towards the desirable and undesirable, was steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of material nature. The Srila Prabhupada's purport. Arjuna submitted three different questions, and the Lord answers them one after another. In these verses, Krishna first indicates that a person transcendently situated has no envy and does not hanker for anything. When a living entity stays in this material world, embodied by the material body, it is to be understood that he is under the control of one of the three modes of material nature. When he is actually out of the body, when he is out of the clutches of the material modes of nature, then he is out of the clutches of the material modes of nature. But as long as he's not out of the material body, he should be neutral. He should engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord, so that his identity with the material body will automatically be forgotten. When one is conscious of the material body, he acts only for sense gratification. When one transfers the consciousness to Krishna, sense gratification automatically stops. One does not need this material body. He does not need to accept the dictations of the material body. The qualities of the material modes in the body will act, but as spirit soul, the self is aloof from such activities. How does he become aloof? He does not desire to enjoy the body, nor does he desire to get out of it. Thus, transcendently situated, the devotee becomes automatically free. He need not try to become free from the influence of the material modes of nature. The next question concerns the dealings of a transcendentally situated person. The materially situated person is affected by so-called honor and dishonor offered to the body, but the transcendently situated person is not affected by such false honor and dishonor. He performs his duty in Krishna consciousness, does not mind whether man honors or dishonors him. He accepts things that are favorable for his duty in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, he has no necessity of anything material, either stone or gold. He takes everyone as his dear friend who helps him in his execution of Krishna consciousness, and he does not hate his so-called enemy. He is equally disposed and sees everything on an equal level because he knows perfectly well that it has nothing to do with material existence. Social and political issues do not affect him because he knows the situation of the temporary upheavals and disturbances. He does not attempt anything for his own sake. He can attempt anything for Krishna, but for his personal self, he does not attempt anything. By such behavior, one becomes actually transcendently situated. So the translation again. Supreme Personality of God had said, O son of Pandu, he does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, but longs for them when they disappear, was unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities. Remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, was situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, was equal towards the desirable and the undesirable, was steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. Om Agyanat Vinandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Arjuna is asking certain questions in this 14th chapter, which deals with the modes of material nature. And in the 14th chapter, Krishna said to Arjuna that this knowledge is better than anything else he's explained before. Now, Krishna has explained confidential knowledge about Brahman, about Paramatma, and in the 9th chapter, for instance, he specifically expressed about pure devotional service to himself, concluding the 9th chapter with the words of Manmana Bhavaman Bhakto, Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru, Mamai Vaishasi Yuktaivam, Atmana Mat Parayanaha. Engage your mind always in thinking about me. Manmana Bhava, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. The result is that you'll come to me without fail. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. So this is the aim of Bhagavad Gita, to teach one that. And as Krishna says in the 18th chapter, give up everything else except for that. Now, in order to do that, one has to have a certain type of consciousness. Of course, we have our sadhana bhakti, which is essential that we perform every day. We have chanting the holy name, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, worshiping the deity, serving the devotees, and making the atmosphere spiritual. The best way of doing that is to absorb our consciousness in Krishna's service and Krishna consciousness, both the service and consciousness. Now, the aim of that is to gradually experience Krishna consciousness. And Krishna consciousness is experienced to one degree by just chanting Hare Krishna. But when we can actually feel Krishna's presence, not only Krishna, when we talk about Krishna, we're also referring to his expansions and his devotees and devotional service. And when we're chanting Hare Krishna, at least we can feel the presence of Krishna and Srimati Radharani. And as our memory, as our consciousness expands, then we can actually simultaneously, while we chant Hare Krishna, spontaneously, Krishna's form will come into remembrance. And as we can concentrate on Krishna's form, then we can actually concentrate on feeling Krishna's presence, his mood, the mood of his devotees. And eventually we can use our spiritual senses. For instance, Krishna is sitting there and he's weaving a Kandama garland for Srimati Radharani, yellow garland made of Kandama flowers. And beneath his feet is the Jamunas flowing by, and there are very beautiful pink lotus flowers on the Jamuna. And at the end of that particular picture with the Jamuna, there's a swan, a white swan floating in the Jamuna. And Srimati Radharani is approaching Krishna in a white sari. And in her hand, there's a rose, and there's a rose bush in the background. And Krishna is underneath the tree, and on top of the tree, there's a peacock. So we can look at the picture, but ultimately we can only experience the picture if we remember what the picture is. In other words, we can look at the picture, and unless we actually look at the picture, we won't see the picture. It'll just look like a picture. Krishna is there, Srimati Radharani is there, there's a peacock there, whatever. It's just a picture. Or if we can actually believe that this is Krishna and Srimati Radharani and this is Vrindavan, then it's a whole different experience. But in any case, even if we just theoretically believe that this is Krishna and Srimati Radharani and this is Vrindavan, unless we can actually feel what's going on there, it won't be Vrindavan for us. In other words, there's a point where we actually have to feel Krishna's presence in the picture, Srimati Radharani's presence, and that means also their mood of love, selfless service, and also the experience of the peacock, the swan, the lotus flowers, the Kandama flower, what they're also experiencing in the loving exchanges between Radha and Krishna. So that's called transcendental happiness or pleasure, because the nature of Krishna's pastimes is just that of bliss, knowledge eternally. There's nothing else going on there except for pure love and pleasure and full consciousness. So if we enter into that, then the result is that we can tolerate what's going on the outside in the material world. If we don't have that consciousness, then our tolerance is, one can learn tolerance. Someone can be torturing you and you can be tolerant. But that's not exactly what we're aiming for, just that kind of tolerance. Because there reaches a point that we can't tolerate anymore. And since at the time of death, it's usually a very intolerant situation, not only because of possible physical pain, but if one is attached to what to speak of our family, our possessions, generally the thing we're most attached to is our body. So when we're about to lose everything that we spent maybe 80 years working for, and we think we're going to just be tolerant, we can learn tolerance, but it's not going to do us that much good. Because basically speaking, at the time of death, they say that you remember everything that happened to you very quickly during your lifetime. And therefore, one who's been cultivating material life for all these years, one remembers all the different ups and downs of material existence, all our attachments, all our aversions, and then we wind up somewhere else according to whatever attachments and aversions. It's not that we suddenly become very tolerant at the time of death, and then all the things that we didn't tolerate during our lifetime, we suddenly become very tolerant of at the time of death. It doesn't work like that. On the other hand, even if one learns tolerance with the whole lifetime, which people don't do nowadays, they're not being trained in tolerance. They're being trained exactly the opposite. Everything has to be immediate and according to the way I like it. Therefore, at the time of leaving this body, people are not exactly going to be, they're not trained in tolerance, and therefore it's inevitable they're going to get the reactions of all their different activities during this lifetime. On the other hand, the devotees, we're trying to actually cultivate consciousness of Krishna. And the whole process is that we can actually think about Krishna, manmana, in such a way as we become his devotee. Madhava, bhava. In other words, we're supposed to think about Krishna in such a way as we can actually feel Krishna, feel Shrimati Radharani, feel their exchanges. Then we have something else to do other than material life. If we're in the Hare Krishna movement and we don't do that, then we're simply trying to do the same thing in the Hare Krishna movement we probably would have done outside the Hare Krishna movement. In other words, those who come to the Hare Krishna movement generally are quite pious, or they become pious. And therefore, they have the objectives of a pious person. Pious person, generally, they want to get free from suffering. And therefore, they learn the process of controlling their senses and avoiding sinful activity, which is the root cause of suffering. Then after they become free from suffering to a large extent, then they decide now is the time to live a happy material life. Get a nice family, and the family have the children well mannered, have nice food for everyone, offer to Krishna, have nice place where there's clean air, where there's fresh water. Maybe ideally we're in a place where you can get fresh milk from a cow and live a happy life. Grow old and talk about all our past Sankirtan experiences, whatever. What's that? What did you say, Agnihotra?
Все хорошо.
So but if we don't think about Krishna, if we don't feel the love and ecstasy of Krishna's devotees, if we're not be able to smell the lotus flowers on the Jamuna with our transcendental senses and actually believe that we can put Krishna in our heart
Слышно хорошо.
and experience Krishna, then the result is that we remain on the platform of using Krishna consciousness to have a nice material life, which is good, because that means in our next lifetime we're likely to come back and try to have another happy material life. But that's not Krishna consciousness. Now, how to do that, how to go beyond just having a pleasant material existence through Krishna consciousness, Well, that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has its Sankirtan movement. And the Sankirtan movement means there has to be some austerity. Of course, nowadays, previously, when the devotees were living in the temple, many of them were escaping from their previous lives. In other words, they were so much engaged in sense gratification. They were so, what they say in English, they were so burnt out by their materialistic activities, so much intoxication, that even in the temple, they were still intoxicated. Even after they stopped taking LSD, they were still on an LSD trip. After having so much illicit sex for so long, that they actually felt themselves detached from it. And compared to Prasadam, they were ready. First of all, if you take too much intoxication and you have too much sense gratification, then the result is you lose your appetite. You don't want to eat anything. But then when you eat prasadam, then suddenly you become hungry again. You can actually eat properly. And then, of course, this mental speculation, that's a whole other thing, or gambling. In any case, the Krishna consciousness movement in the beginning gave a perfect shelter for those who were seeking such shelter, who were ready, and many devotees were ready for anything at that particular time. They realized that material life was not going to satisfy them, and they realized that the so-called leaders were not really leaders, they were cheaters. And they were young enough, they had enough energy left, that they were willing to sacrifice their energy because they believed that, first of all, this was a better life than they were living before. And if they wanted to keep on living it, they had to follow the authorities. And so they did quite a bit of austerity. Those who went on a book distribution with the proper attitude, they actually became enlivened by doing it. They felt another state of existence. Whether they understood it was by Krishna's mercy or not, that's another thing. But there was austerity, and many devotees couldn't take the austerity. Some of them could. But there was an enthusiasm that was built up, first of all, belief in the authorities and belief in the process to a certain extent, that it actually changed their lives. Not transcendentally necessarily, but it took them from the lowest level of material consciousness to a state where they actually felt themselves to be like human beings again, with a purpose of life. So then, of course, Prabhupada left after some time, and our leadership was not necessarily very mature, nor were the devotees in general very mature in Krishna consciousness. And therefore, at some time, the temples in certain areas became, let's say, less populated, especially when their authority, their guru, whatever, got into difficulty themselves. And therefore, because they were following that authority, they just kept on following that authority, and they got into difficulties themselves. Their authority got into difficulty, and therefore they followed the authority and got into difficulty. They didn't really understand the transcendental nature of what we're trying to accomplish, and therefore they kept on following the external behavior of whoever their authority was. On the other hand, like in Poland, when I got there in Poland in the end of the 1980s, then at that time, Poland was quite simple. When I used to drive to Poland from Belgium through Germany, when we got to Poland, there were horse and buggies on the road. It slowed the traffic up quite a bit. There are no billboards advertising anything because there was nothing to sell. And if you put up a poster for a program, one day before, 50 people would come. Or if you put up a poster a week and did some advertisement, minimum advertisement, 300 people would come because there's no competition. There's nothing to buy, or very little to buy. There is no, I guess, on the television, it wasn't very advanced. There was less sense gratification, let's put it that way. People were less ambitious about getting a higher education, because if you got a higher education, you get paid the same thing as people working at a gas station. So not everyone was so enthusiastic about material life at that time. And therefore, at that time, when I got there are temples all over Poland, and every temple that you went to, there's wall-to-wall, literally wall-to-wall devotees sleeping there. I go to a temple, you would have to, even I was a sannyasi, or Indradu Maharaj was there, because sometimes we had to have our special room with wall-to-wall devotees, but in the temple room, there wasn't enough room for everyone to sleep. So everyone just slept on the floor, and you had to make sure you got a space to sleep on. But then they introduced the European Union into Poland. Big celebration. Now we're going to become free. We're going to become part of the sacred land, the promised land. And then suddenly devotees woke up and they thought, wow, we have an opportunity for economic development, and now we can learn how to enjoy sense gratification. Enough with all this austerity of sleeping on the floor and trying to tolerate all the other devotees in the temple, and having to go out and distribute books and chant the whole Hare Krishna in all kinds of weather. Now we can actually get a good job. We can go to England and get paid 3 times more than we can in Poland. We're free. We're liberated. And then, of course, there are other problems that came about with the leadership having problems themselves. And then the devotees thought, well, why should I sacrificing so much of my life for this movement, and our leadership, they're telling me to do all these things, they themselves are getting into trouble. So why should I spend the rest of my life in a movement where when I get up to their age, I'm going to get into trouble like they are? Might as well get into trouble now while I'm young. Why waste my life and then get into trouble when I'm old and I can't enjoy like I can now? And therefore, the devotees start to leave, getting jobs, making money, enjoying their lives, so-called material life. And but that's not the aim of the Hare Krishna movement. In other words, unless we understand what the purpose of the Hare Krishna movement is, and that is to become Krishna conscious by practicing every day sadhana in such a way as we become detached. Detached from what? Now, Krishna does take our karma in the sense that if we're practicing Krishna consciousness, we're not necessarily subject to our karma. What does that mean? It means that according to our past activities, we're destined to suffer or enjoy a certain amount of material life. Now, Krishna arranges it. If we're trying to become conscious of Krishna, he arranges our problems in such a way is that we can learn at least a minimum amount of tolerance at a time. He doesn't necessarily give us the full results of our work. But, as Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, that one has to pass the test of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses him with genuine spiritual understanding. In other words, if our actual aim is to focus our attention and eventually give our love to Krishna, if we take that as the actual goal of our life, and therefore, in spite of the so-called good times and the bad times that we experience, we keep on doing our sadhana, keep on rising in the morning, chanting Hare Krishna, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, keep on trying to focus our minds on Krishna, then the result is gradually we can learn tolerance. And we're not so much afraid of what's going to happen in the future. We're not so much anxiety when the good times will be. We're not so much afraid what's going to happen to me. We're not going to the astrologer every other day and finding out what's the auspicious times to eat prasadam. That we're willing to experience whatever Krishna provides for us, either pleasant or unpleasant, according to our karma. And at the same time, we're undeterred in our desire to actually look inside ourselves and see Krishna. And eventually, by such practice, then we actually make advancement in Krishna consciousness. Now, of course, we're advised that we should chant our rounds with attention. But we can't chant our rounds with attention unless we're able to tolerate all the thoughts that are going through our minds. But we can't tolerate the thoughts that are going through our minds if we don't tolerate what they represent, which is our experiences. And we can't change our experience unless we change our vision of what was actually happening. Unless we actually believe that everything is under Krishna's control and that nothing happens by accident, that I'm not experiencing this just by somehow or another I made a mistake yesterday and now I have some experience which is undesirable. If we think that if we don't see Krishna's hand in what's happening, and then be thoughtful enough to think about what does Krishna want me to do under these circumstances in order to help me become a better servant of Krishna and therefore ultimately more conscious of Krishna, then we can chant Hare Krishna and try to pay attention, but there'll be too many other thoughts that are going on for us to, and unless we're advancing Krishna consciousness, then we don't really necessarily have the ability to feel Krishna's presence in the holy name. And unless we feel Krishna's presence in the holy name, at least feel his presence, what to speak of remembering his form or his associates or his pastimes, unless we feel that, then the chanting doesn't feel that much different from all these other thoughts we have. As a matter of fact, we may actually think it's more entertaining to think about, Romeo or Juliet or the last movie I saw some time ago or whatever thoughts are right. Maybe I should chant Hare Krishna and get my rounds done and think about something which is entertaining in the meantime. Otherwise, right, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. If we don't experience anything when we're doing it, then we're not necessarily going to spend our time, focus our attention, listening to ourselves, trying to as they say in English, plow our minds through the 16 rounds just to get them done. But then unless we become conscious of Krishna and take it seriously that I have to change my habits, I have to change my relationships, I have to change my faith, as Krishna says, I have to change my intelligence, I have to change my mind, I have to change my faith, I have to change who I'm or what I'm taking shelter in, to arrive at the platform where I can see that everyone is Krishna's eternal servant. Everyone has a right in the uniform of life and the duty to take shelter of Krishna. And unless I take shelter of Krishna, then I'm not going to be able to help anyone else actually, in a meaningful way, take shelter of Krishna either. Unless I experience happiness in chanting Hare Krishna, unless I experience happiness in feeling about Krishna, in worshiping Krishna, and feeling myself to be a devotee of Krishna, then how can I convince anyone else to do the same thing? And unless I try to serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission of telling others about Krishna, whether it be a husband or a wife or children or some friend or something, unless I'm actually thinking about that this person is Krishna's eternal servant, and it's my duty to help them become conscious of Krishna. And I've experienced, at least, that if I chant Hare Krishna and I do it with some feeling, actually asking Srimati Radharani and Krishna to engage me in their loving service, and by doing so, by their mercy, I remember Krishna and I feel Krishna's presence, and I actually know what Krishna consciousness is, what it actually feels like, what the experience is, then I'm never going to become very enthusiastic about giving some dry mantra to others. My dear sir, please chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Or if you don't like that, if that's too dry, just chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Rama Day Day Day, Hey Ram Ram, Kitty Kitty, Ram Ram, and let your life become perfect that way. So two things. One is that there are times when we get some illumination. There are times when we get some attachment. There are times when we have delusions, but we shouldn't become attached to them. In other words, if we're actually taking the process of Krishna consciousness to some degree or another seriously and remembering Krishna and experiencing him, if we do that, then there'll be times, good times, there'll be bad times, there'll be horrible times, but we'll remain trying to become conscious of Krishna through all of that. Because we know that real happiness is simply being in consciousness of Krishna, not that the material world is good or the material world is bad. For some of us, maybe we have pleasant lives. Maybe we have horrible lives. Maybe sometimes it's pleasant and sometimes it's unpleasant. But Krishna, if we add Krishna consciousness to it, then whether it's pleasant or unpleasant or a mixture, then we'll know that really my consciousness, my determination, what I'm trying to accomplish is to actually think about Krishna. And not only just think about Krishna, but give my actual feelings to Krishna. But we can give our feelings to Krishna when we try to act for Krishna, try to serve Krishna, especially by trying to explain to others about Krishna, if we can do that, by giving them prasadam or giving them a book, or trying to act towards others as if they're Krishna's eternal servants. And then Krishna will help us by giving us the intelligence how to do that. And the more we do that, the more he becomes pleased, then the more he'll help us remember him, help us meditate upon him, help us become his devotee, feel for him and his devotees. And then as our intelligence increases, then our mind becomes purified, and we can more actually deeply think about Krishna. And then one day we'll be living with Krishna. Actually, when we remember Krishna's forms and his activities and his pastimes, we'll actually realize we're actually there in Krishna, with Krishna. And then in the future, after meditating very deeply like that, then one day Krishna will actually reveal to us what the spiritual world is actually like. And then we can begin our normal life again in Krishna consciousness as a servant of Krishna. But we have to begin somewhere, and therefore having a daily morning program and evening program, and try to do something in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's service. And do that every day, regularly. There'll be good times, there'll be bad times, there'll be in-between times, but just keep on at it. And remember that we're trying to become conscious of Krishna. We're trying to feel for Krishna. We're trying to chant Hare Krishna and very lovingly and happily chant Hare Krishna, because Krishna will not reveal himself. Srimati Radharani, her associates will not reveal themselves unless we're on the same level or trying to become on the same level of consciousness that they're on. How can they reveal themselves if we're not on the same consciousness that they're on, at least trying? And when they see we're trying to be happy, we're trying to become loving, we're trying to be attentive, we're trying to do something to please Krishna by giving Krishna to others, giving Krishna to ourselves, then they'll give us the intelligence to understand how to think about them in such a way as to actually experience them, experience their mood. We may not have it now, but if we make that objective and chant Hare Krishna as best we can with that objective in mind, then they'll be merciful to us and they'll reveal to us what that consciousness is like. And then we'll understand what Krishna consciousness is. Unless they reveal it to us, we can't understand it. And unless we ask them to reveal it to us, then how can they do it? So at least we should have that interest. We want to experience what Krishna consciousness is. And we know if we ask Srimati Radharani and Krishna and their associates to reveal it to us in a humble way, in a sincere way, then that's what they'll do for us. They'll reveal to us their existence, and then we'll understand what our real existence is like too, or should be. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Martha Sarthi.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, thank you so much for the class. So how can we gauge if we are trying sincerely?
Well, we can look at ourselves and see what we're doing. If we're chanting Hare Krishna and we're driving a car, eating a sandwich, listening to the news, and looking at our counter beads, praying for them to fall as quickly as possible, then we probably have some improvement in how we can show our sincerity to Krishna. If one moment we're praying to Krishna to please engage me in your loving service, chanting Hare Krishna, and then we're bored chanting so many rounds and we turn on Netflix to see what the latest movie is, then we're not exactly showing Krishna that we're 100% sincere yet. So we have to watch what we're doing. And then we can see how sincere we actually are about becoming conscious of Krishna. And even when we make a small improvement in that, then Krishna will be very satisfied with us and he'll encourage us. So we have to make some room in our lives, at least externally, so that we show Krishna we're somewhat sincere, we're trying to become sincere, and then he'll encourage us to become more sincere. Therefore, Prabhupada said that one should try to pass the test of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses him with genuine spiritual understanding. So we have to show genuine desire with our body and hopefully with our minds eventually too. Not to accept every nonsense thing that goes through our mind as real. And with our words, we have to be careful how we speak to others, what we say to others, why we say it to them. Then Krishna will help us improve our devotional activities, improve our devotional mentality, improve our devotional consciousness, our devotional understanding. If we do that, then when we chant Hare Krishna and see the happy result, then we'll actually chant Hare Krishna more sincerely. Actually understanding that by associating with Srimati Radharani, associating with Krishna, associating with their associates, within our consciousness, within our minds, then actually the love and ecstasy that we're feeling, the attraction we're feeling, will improve our external devotional service in every respect also. The fire of knowledge means the fire of ecstasy and love and Krishna consciousness. And if we experience that, then externally we'll act with more love and devotion too. And we act externally with more love and devotion, then when we chant and we hear, we'll also hear and chant with more devotion and love. Nirguna Das.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Maharaj, I have a question about we're reading the Srimad Bhagavatam that in Vayakunta, the women are they don't have what to do there, so they just clean the surfaces that are already clean. So I was kind of wondering what's the situation there? They don't have any service to do.
No, everyone in Vaikuntha is unemployed. They don't, no one there has a salary. The only salary is trying to please Krishna, Lord Narayan. That's the only thing they're trying to do. So Lord Narayan doesn't need anything. It's not that he has to hire people to clean his Chintamani palace. What he wants is love and affection from his devotees. Therefore, when he sees the devotees cleaning the Chintamani palaces, and I doubt that's the only thing they're doing, they also talk about Krishna, they also dance for Krishna, they eat for Krishna, they do so many things. But one of the things they do, it's an example of how by love and devotion, whatever we're doing, Lord Narayan is pleased. And when Lord Narayan is pleased, the happiness of his pleasure, the affection that one experiences overwhelms the devotee. So he just wants to do anything he can to please Krishna. So Vaikuntha, Goloka Vrindavan, it's a place that the actual progress is being made is more intense affection and love, the more experience of how wonderful Krishna is and how wonderful his devotees are, a never new awakening of the unlimited potential of love and devotion and bliss that the devotees experience. So whatever they're doing, if it produces that, then it's a success. Radharani Devi Dasi.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I came late, and as soon as the sound was on, what you were speaking about, I guess a plan of a materialist or maybe a devotee who wants to move out. from the uh, wants to move out from, you know, from practice of devotional service. Literally, your words were my thinking today, but not about leaving the Krishna conscious movement, but about, all right, now I'm back in Russia, I can get a steady job and material situation will be finally improved. So then, because before I was trying to surrender in a way that just have a lower income and depend in that way on Krishna, and so I would have more time serving him. And as you know, I traveled to India and then was in Christchurch. So my question is, it's hard to guess. Like I was pretty confident today that okay, now this is more responsible way to look at life and get finally a good, well-paid job. So then my anxiety will be less. So how to understand what is plan of Krishna then, where it is like, you know, material situation, that it is not too bewildering for a devotee. And because I was thinking, well, I just created too many anxieties before with my choice of surrender, and now it is time to settle somehow. But then the lecture for me began exactly with those words, so I was a little bit confused to maybe my track of thoughts. I lost it somewhere, maybe because I felt when I kind of did not find a place where I can do more service in, you know, in other temples, I was thinking, well, Krishna is rejecting me. I just have to stop trying. And this way I have to try to live more balanced material life. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah. There are many factors to be taken into account to have a balanced material life. And unless we're thoughtful, unless we know someone who's thoughtful can help us think, then the result is that we go from one extreme to the next. In the aim and the objective to become balanced, we try everything throughout the whole universe to become balanced. And unless we actually think, if we think that with our tiny brains and without deep thoughtfulness and prayer to Krishna and taking good advice from others, that we don't really achieve balance, what we achieve is the same thing the material scientists achieve. Just finding out what the scientists, all they're doing is finding out what's wrong. And so after thousands of years of experimentation and finding out that every theory they had was wrong, what they do is they keep on experimenting because they get paid to do it, at least the scientists do. And they don't really care to find out what's right anymore. All it's doing is like they want to experience and experiment. Well, we shouldn't be like that. We should understand that there are certain things essential if we're going to actually become conscious of Krishna. And one of them is the association of devotees. It's not possible to actually make any progress in enthusiastically following the other processes without some good association. Number two is that we're in certain bodies. We can't think, well, I'm a spirit soul, and therefore that's more important than being in a certain body. We have to understand that we're soul in a certain body, and that these bodies have certain needs. And if we deny those needs, then we're imitating someone on a level that we're not on. Therefore, we have to take that into account also. And we have to have certain material needs that have to be met. We have to feel some security, especially when anyone in this material world nowadays had to feel some security. Otherwise, how can we chant Hare Krishna? So these factors have to be taken into account. And then we have to practice. We have to have some time to practice Krishna consciousness. And we have to avoid bad association. It's not that we're so advanced that we can watch any movie, we can associate with any person, we can eat any food, we can go anywhere, and somehow or another I'm going to advance in Krishna consciousness. No, even if we had hear one bad thing about a devotee, and if we don't, and we accept it, then immediately we come on the level of who's ever talking bad about that devotee. And all the good qualities that we acquired from that devotee, they're immediately forgotten about and lost. On the other hand, if we hear only the glories of a devotee, and even when we see some bad habits that they have, if we still accept these as divine, then we also get into trouble. So we have to become reasonable also. What kind of body I have, who am I associating with, what my material needs are, what time I need to practice Krishna consciousness, and then try to arrange with all the factors, other factors too, try to figure out what would be my best place or situation that's within some kind of possibility. Okay?
Yes, Guru Maharaj, makes sense. Thank you very much.
It's like before you get married, you should inquire from your partner how many children they want, where they want to live, how much service they want to do at the temple, what's the standard that materially they want to live in, what's their plans for the future. Not that you get married and you find out they want 5 children, I don't like children, I don't want any. I want to go to the temple every day, and they only want to go on Janmashtami. I want to live in a 5-story building, and they want to rent an apartment. And then we wonder why we're incompatible, because we never found out whether, in the beginning, whether we had the same objectives or not. Previously, before people got married, then they'd actually the parents would do some inquiry to find out if there were some similarities between the couple. And then they make the decision. So before we do something, we should be a little thoughtful and see what the different factors are and see if there's actually some possibility at all that I can develop my Krishna consciousness in this situation. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Haribol.
Krishna.
Holiness Prahladananda Swami Maharaj ki.
Jai.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.